This is probably the worst example of coordination between two ships under one flag. And if you follow the news, you already know we are talking about China. I wish it would be Western propaganda against communist China, but it's not. A Chinese Navy destroyer and a Coast Guard ship both smashed into each other while chasing the poor Philippines coast ship Suluan. As a result, one party didn't have any choice left but to keep silent for days about it, and the other party didn't waste any time celebrating this unexpected incident. The issue is still hot and may escalate further, as after a day and so forth, we have seen some fighter jets buzzing over this area. Additionally, the U.S. has deployed its naval support to the Philippines to counter China. But you will not get the full taste of this incident without knowing the background. So let's start from the beginning. If you look at the map, this tiny spot is a constant battleground for China and the Philippines. Because both nations are civilized, they don't fire missiles and bullets at each other. Instead, they use water cannons. But if we see the record, China has been a clear bully since 2012. Despite this area being very close to the Philippines, China claims this is in its own maritime territory. Yeah, the territorial dispute, which virtually exists between almost every country, but a territory far away from mainland China doesn't make any sense. So there is a lot more cooking in it. The South China Sea is one of the busiest trade routes on Earth. Around 60% of maritime trade happens through this water channel. There are $5.4 billion worth of untapped oil and gas resources in this area. Marine biodiversity for the fishermen. But that's not all. There is a Chinese version of this story. They claim their territory based on some ancient pacts and maps, often called the 9-line claim. In 2016, UNO's 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration invalidated this claim. They say we have been here for somewhat 4,000 years, and United Nations simply can't tell us because we are just older. Contrary to that, China started claiming this territory in 1947, and they came after it in 2012. This is like one of your forefathers woke up from his deathbed after thousands of years and took decades to get fully conscious, and now he wants his left belongings back from you. Jokes apart, there is also something serious. Around 80% of oil from the world to China goes through the South China Sea. It's like the main artillery for China to survive and prosper. But when it comes to oil, no matter where, how can the U.S. leave itself far behind? It has been a consistent position of the Americans to counter China by supporting the other countries like Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and even India. AUKUS and Quad are part of this political move. This is the reason you see a Chinese fighter jet hovering over the area of incident. And on the next day, the U.S. Navy sends ships in support of the Philippines after the unforgettable metal collision. Now, there is a question. How did it happen? Well, it's quite simple. The Philippine Coast Guard ship was patrolling like any other day. It had food and fuel for the fishermen stuck in that part. But as it reached near Scarborough Shoal, a Chinese Coast Guard ship appeared. It is important to mention that this triangular amoeba-like water body known as Scarborough Shoal has utmost economic importance not just for the Republic of the Philippines, but also for China and Taiwan. They all claim sovereignty over Scarborough Shoal, which is about 140 miles west of the main Philippine island of Luzon and within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. This reef area is home to rich fishing grounds. Usually in such conditions, the Philippines politely says that Chinese have no legal right to patrol in this territory. In response, the Chinese, in their worst English accent, deny the fact.
The area under the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China.
But sometimes they chose to harass the Philippines Coast Guard. It was a bad day for the Philippines Coast Guard ship. The Chinese ship opened its water cannon. The Philippines ship did not move an inch from the disputed boundary. In other words, the Chinese made it crystal clear: run. But the Philippines had enough patience to tease the bully a little bit more. Soon the chase began. The Chinese ship accelerated the throttle at full speed, and so did the Philippines. In a few moments, the Chinese ship came very close to prove its might. But the helmsman who was behind the steering ship did not know that the Philippines was going to give him a big jolt with a big sound, which he may not have heard of before. Actually, the Philippines ship was running not because of the water cannon on the Coast Guard ship. The real fear came from the intent of a Chinese destroyer coming toward them at full speed. The crew of the Chinese Coast Guard ship was so indulgent in throwing water on the Philippines that it did not notice the approaching Chinese destroyer. Usually, such ships have cutting-edge navigation systems and dedicated personnel to take careful maneuvers through water. Perhaps the plan was to sandwich the Philippine ship between the Chinese destroyer and the Coast Guard ship. If the destroyer reached the point, the Philippine ship would ram into them, and all the blame would have gone on the Philippines. But luckily, the Philippines ship was smaller, which also makes a boat faster. They managed to escape out of the booby trap. On the contrary, the destroyer coming from the other side could not lower its speed because it was so huge, and in water, you have no disc brakes to stop instantly. In the next few seconds, the Philippines Coast Guard ship left both of the ships behind, and this was the epic moment when the metal of both Chinese ships collided.
Kaboom!
Next, what you saw was very terrible. After the perfect smash, the front of the Chinese Coast Guard ship turned into pressed scrap like we see in the car junkyard. It's hard to say what damage the Chinese destroyer got, but the jolt should be good enough to make the crew fall on their backs for a moment. A fun theory is that the ship captain was in the toilet when both ships collided. Imagine how he felt the jolt when the crash happened. The Philippines had a perfect moment to celebrate, but they saw the destroyer was still coming after them. So, they keep running. After a moment, the Chinese destroyer turned the ship. Perhaps it was the moment when the captain came out of the toilet and started lashing out at boys to first save their own drowning Coast Guard ship. There were some people on the ship's deck, which you can see in the video. We hope they will be safe and sound. After all, we are all human beings before being Chinese and Filipinos or whatever country you live in. The people on the back of the crew captured the aftermath of the epic ship smash on their cameras. You can see the water cannon is still running. No, you are wrong about China. Some of their products are very good and reliable. This cannon is the best example, though someone completely forgot to switch it off. Anyways, the Philippines claimed that they offered help on open radio, but the Chinese did not answer. Perhaps the radio system in the Chinese ship was bought from Temu, and it did not withstand a single hit. However, we believe it's just point scoring. A few minutes ago, you felt a serious danger, which may not be lethal, but may give you injuries. Now you are helping them with a big heart. And sincerely, if I were there, I wouldn't seek help from the same ship that I want to wash away with my water cannon. Rather, I would let myself down in shame. And it does not require seawater. The next day we saw a whole ceremony of this wonderful act of bravery, though they would be mourning if it went otherwise. In his speech, the Philippine Coast Guard officer encouraged his mates to stay calm and stay professional.
We should always remain calm. We should always remain professional.
That's truly inspirational. But I think when this ship, Suluan, goes near this area, Chinese will attempt to take revenge. My advice is to stay away from them as much as possible. Also, the Chinese should try 3 ships instead of 2 to not break Suluan, but their own ship-breaking record. Contrary to the Philippines side, the Chinese would be investigating how this nightmare came true. And during this time, both the destroyer crew and the Coast Guard would be taking turns in their sleep. Accountability in any armed forces is potentially tough, especially when other nations laugh at the act. On 13th August 2025, we saw a Chinese fighter jet in the sky, and it came close to a Philippine Coast Guard plane in the South China Sea. It came within about 200 feet. This video also made news across the world because the Philippine aircraft was carrying journalists. The encounter lasted for 20 minutes, and the Chinese demanded the Philippine aircraft leave immediately. The same day, 2 U.S. warships, the littoral combat ship USS Cincinnati and the destroyer USS Higgins, were spotted about 30 nautical miles away from the shoal. The Chinese claimed they managed to expel them from their territory. It's a big claim for the Navy, who could not stop a Coast Guard ship with their destroyer. The U.S. confirmed that they were practicing freedom of navigation. China simply could not make them run away by throwing water on them. Calling them freedom of navigation operations is another way to poke the bully boy of this region. The cunning Uncle Sam is trying its best to counter China on every level. Anytime if the conflict turns into war, the U.S., with the help of its alliances, will block the sea route to China. Due to this, China won't be able to do much. In response, China is building artificial islands. These islands are not for getting sunlight like people do on beaches. The islands have runways and sophisticated military weapons installed to gain control over the South China Sea. So obviously, if World War III began, South China would be the first battleground. But one thing the cunning Uncle Sam knows is that no matter what the Chinese do, they haven't fought a single war in years. On the other side, U.S. armed forces are battle-hardened and simply more capable. So China will think 100 times before initiating anything against the U.S. But the last time the U.S. Navy ship was spotted in Scarborough Shoal was 6 years ago. Hey guys, we know you love your country, and these are some intense topics. Our intent is simply to tell the story in a fun way so you can talk about it with a happy face. After all, on this side or the other, we are all human beings. Subscribe if you like the video. We will see you next time.